Good morning, everyone. I'm Teresa Cutlip with the Purchasing Division. Welcome to today's session on doing business with West Virginia, presented by Mark Totten, Technical Services Manager, and Courtney Johnson, Communication and Training Manager. And now we'll go ahead and get started with Mark.
Good morning, everybody. I want to say thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Mark Totten, and as Teresa said, I have a technical role here at the Purchasing Division, and two of the programs that I administer on behalf of the agency are related to vendor registration and small women and minority-owned business certification. So taking that experience that I have over my 16 years at the Purchasing Division, I've put together this presentation for the vendor community. And I think that whether or not you're a vendor who is new to doing business with the state, or whether you have a little bit of experience competing for state contracts, I think there's going to be something here to help you develop the amount of contracts and awards that you would potentially receive from our agencies in the 55 counties. So what we're going to talk about, and the things that I want you to walk away knowing, is, the answer to the question, why does the state buy from the private sector in the first place? And we'll talk a little bit about, why the state of West Virginia, with all its resources, needs the private sector. And we'll also talk about different competitive strategies for you, depending on your business model, that will allow you to find a place to fit into the public procurement process. We're also going to answer possibly the most important question, which is, how do you find out what the state of West Virginia's agencies need? And we'll spend a lot of time on that and how you can search for those opportunities. But to me, that is what is worth spending the most time on, because we don't get very far into this conversation until you are going to ask yourselves, what does the state need what I have? Now, in building on that conversation, we'll talk about how you can more easily learn about contract opportunities with our agencies. We know that your day does not revolve around searching through state government websites. So there are some tools that will help you with a double-handed approach to searching for opportunities. And I'll tell you how you can set those tools up for your business, for you to utilize that search in addition to manually looking through the list of opportunities. And we'll also kind of take a deep dive into state procurement transparency. So for the vendors that want to do your homework on a different level, let's say you're getting ready to compete for a very specific contract, we'll tell you where you can find some information about how that contract was administered in the past. I'll wrap up my section by going over briefly what would make you eligible to receive a contract, as well as how our SWAM certification program could help you compete for contracts elsewhere. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on registrations and quote unquote bureaucracy. Some of the best news that I can deliver to you today is that you don't have to be registered with any state agency in order to bid on one of the solicitation opportunities that we'll talk about. So there's not going to be an investment on your part other than time, just for the stage where you are competing for state awards and state contracts. So let's kick off and lay down a little bit of a foundation. Why does the state of West Virginia, with its 25,000 or so employees across the 55 counties, need something from the private sector in the first place? And the answer to that question is, even with the resources that we have, there are some things that it would not be efficient for us to manufacture ourselves. And trucks and automobiles is a good example of that. So for all of our hundreds of agencies' missions, there are some things that is just most efficiently procured from the private sector. And when my agency is making those purchases on behalf of the state agencies, or if a state agency is procuring their own need at their level, the state procurement process is going to harness the bulk buying power of the state of West Virginia anytime we need a specific commodity or service. So most of what we procure is put out for bid so the state of West Virginia gets the most for its taxpayer dollars and pays the lowest price possible. Now, in addition to things that we procure through competitive bid, and we hope that these are as rare as possible, but in some cases, state agencies find themselves in an emergency situation where life or property is at stake. And just for example, let's say there's a flood or a severe storm and there's damage to state assets. The state agencies may be authorized either in the case of a self-emergency declaration or a gubernatorial emergency declaration to procure in an emergency situation where the agency could go directly to you, the vendor, to satisfy a need in that emergency situation. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can make sure agencies are aware of who you are, where you are, and what you can do, hopefully not, but when those emergency situations come about. So talking about the way that we, the state of West Virginia, procures from the private sector, probably the most important detail for you to know is that a lot of what we buy is based on the expected dollar threshold of what it is we need. And I'm not going to go into a lot of internal procedures because that's not the point of this session, but the $50,000 threshold in state procurement generally is what determines whether an agency such as the Division of Highways or the Division of Natural Resources is procuring a need on their own, or if my agency, the purchasing division, is procuring that need on behalf of the agency. If something is expected to be over the agency delegated threshold, then my agency is going to be administering those larger procurements. But in the under $50,000 world, an agency is going to be procuring that on their own authority. Now, some agencies have a little bit higher of delegated authority spend threshold, but speaking in very general terms, the threshold between whether or not my agency is administering the contract or whether the agency is administering the contract depends on that $50,000 threshold. The most important difference for you in regard to that threshold is when if you are competing for that contract and it's over $50,000, you're going to be working with and sending your bid to the purchasing division. If it's under that agency delegated threshold, then you would be sending your bid directly to the state agency. So from your point of view, that's the most important difference. And obviously, if you don't send your bid to the right place, then it's going to be problematic when the evaluation is being made for the successful vendor. Now, if you're already thinking about your business model, and I hope you are, you may be, and what is your average transaction with your existing customers? You may be already thinking that anything you sell to the state of West Virginia would be under $50,000 per transaction, or you may be thinking that the average transaction with the state as your customer would be over $50,000. And there are opportunities for your business whether or not you would be operating in one of these worlds or another. For example, if you think that most of your business with the state would be under $50,000, then you can market yourself directly to those agencies, and more importantly, introduce yourself to the state agencies that whose mission might specifically need what it is that you have. And then you can make just as much money in the under $50,000 world as you can in the over $50,000 world. Now, in that under $50,000 arena, bidding procedures might differ, by agency. Like, for example, something may be required differently from the Division of Highways versus the Division of Natural Resources. But anytime you're looking at a solicitation opportunity, there's going to be very specific instructions in regard to what is expected from the vendor community who's trying to compete for those contracts. Now, one more point for the under $50,000 world. On our website, which there is a link there in the left column to this specific page, we have a list of all the quote unquote procurement officers for each of these agencies, and their contact information is listed there. So it's not secret from your perspective who the procurement contacts are at these specific agencies. So, if you are looking at wanting to introduce yourselves to the agencies that need your commodities, then it is very easily knowable who the right people are to begin the conversation with. Now, in that under $50,000 world, I want to break down our internal procedures a little bit for your information, because there is a very efficient and potentially easy process for you to compete for these contracts. Now, if the state is procuring something in a transaction that is expected to be under $5,000, you don't even need to submit a bid to the state. The agency, if they know who you are, can go directly to you and place an order with you under $5,000. If this particular order is under $5,000, it would not be very efficient if agencies were required to go through a highly formal procurement process for something under $5,000 the same way that they would for something that is expected to cost $1 million. Now, in the $5,000 to $20,000 expectation, an agency would just have to get a verbal bid from you, as that is a little bit higher threshold. And then still in the $20,000 to $50,000 arena, an agency would just need a written bid from you. Now and then, if it's over $50,000, it's likely going to be administered by my agency, the purchasing division. But think about your business model. Think about your average transaction with your existing customers. You may fit into one of these thresholds, and you just might be giving verbal bids to state agencies over and over, and then potentially make a lot of money on quantity. So hopefully by now, if you're a vendor who is new to doing business with the state, you are already thinking about, hey, I could just, designate somebody to give verbal bids all day, for example. So let's talk about let's go into some deeper specifics about how you might successfully win a state contract. And from the interactions that I've had with vendors over the years, I've broken this down into 3 strategies by which you might be the successful recipient of a state order or a state contract. Now, the 3 strategies that we're going to talk about are by no means the only paths you have to successfully receiving a contract from a state agency, but these are kind of, in my view, the top 3 that I want to deliver to you this morning and get you started with. If you are a new or moderately experienced vendor when it comes to the public procurement process. The most important thing, as I mentioned at the beginning, the most important part of this process and your participation in it is going to revolve around you knowing what state agencies need in the first place. And the great news about that is it's not secret. You don't have to slip a $5 bill to a state employee somewhere and in order to get an idea of what kind of truck they need. And the best resource for you to know what state agencies need at any given time is a public document called the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin. And the Purchasing Bulletin is actually a publication that goes back several decades. And right now, the bulletin is posted in the vendor self-service portal at a website called wvoasis.gov. And that is the part of the portal where the bulletin lives is a public part of the website. You don't even need to have a login ID to view the purchasing bulletin. Anybody on the earth with an internet connection can go to wvoasis.gov, click vendor self-service button, and then click a button that says view published solicitations. And you'll see a list of what our state agencies in the 55 counties have out for bid right now that's expected to exceed $20,000. Now, you may see something posted in the bulletin that is under $20,000, especially if it's a little bit unusual, and we may not think that there's going to be a lot of options for procuring that commodity. But at any given time in the bulletin, there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunities from all the agencies. So you'll see everything from trucks to fuel to any kind of widget that our agencies need. And as I mentioned before, you do not have to register with any state agency just to respond to one of these solicitation opportunities that are listed in the bulletin. Now, if you were eventually going to be the recipient of a contract, there would be registration requirements. But at this stage, all the state wants to do is encourage as much competition as possible. So it wouldn't be advantageous for us if we made you go through a whole slew of bureaucratic loopholes just to submit a bid that said, hey, I have a truck like that and I'll sell it to you for $70,000. So just to submit an offer to the state, there's no registration required. The only thing that would be necessary is if you want to submit a bid online, you would need to create a user ID for that vendor self-service portal, just so we know who the online bid is coming from. But that's something you can do for free. And most agencies, including my own, also will accept a bid on paper, and it's treated with the exact same weight as if the bid came in online. So hopefully we all agree that this is a very efficient way of you telling the state, I can provide that widget and here's my price for it. And if you go to that vendor self-service portal and click on view published solicitations, this is what the purchasing bulletin is going to look like. You'll see a list of all the projects that are currently out for bid, and it also shows you how much time is left for you to respond, because something will be out for bid 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, and once that response time window is closed, you won't be able to submit a price anymore, but you'll see a countdown clock that tells you how many days and hours and minutes are left for you to submit a response, either online or on paper. Just a couple more things I'll point out on this screenshot. You see that there is a brief description in the far left column for what this project is. You do have more information than that to go on. You don't have to submit a specific price for something just based on the one sentence description that you see here on this front page. If you click on the project number, which is that blue link in the third column, you'll actually be taken to a page where there's a lot more information about the widget that the agency needs. So there's good news about that. In the second column, you see who the procurement officer is at the agency that is administering this solicitation. And you remember that I mentioned that in our world, everything it's either over $50,000 or it's under $50,000. If you look at, even though that may not make any difference to you right now, you can look at this page and see whether or not the agency is administering the transaction, or whether my agency, the purchasing division, is administering the transaction, whether or not the contract solicitation number begins with an A for agency or a C for central purchasing. That will tell you whether or not this is expected to be over or under the $50,000 threshold. So, now at this stage, the only question you're potentially trying to answer is, can I provide this widget to the state? But there's a lot of information to extrapolate right here if you want to look at it deeply enough. And then, of course, there's a button there for you to respond online if you're logged in. So you don't have to read the bulletin front to back, so to speak, as it is presented on that page. You can, if you want to look at every single thing that the state of West Virginia agencies need today, but you probably don't have time for that. And something that you're able to do when it comes to searching for relevant opportunities in the purchasing bulletin is to search it by keyword. And I want to warn you that the bulletin search block is not as instinctive as Google, for example, but there is a certain knack to searching for opportunities specific to your business, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. If you're looking for something relevant to you, I encourage you to keep your search terms as short as possible. If you put in too much and one of the words you include do not match the description that's written, then you're going to exclude that result from your search box. So if you are, let's say you're in business for building maintenance, which could include a lot of different things, but boil down your business to one or two keywords and search the bulletin for that. Let's say that you're a telephony company. Boil your search terms down to phone system, for example, if that's something that you want to search for specifically. In addition, because these words could be in a different order, I encourage you to put wildcards around all your search terms. And what that's going to do is if the state agency has written the solicitation description with the words in a different order, putting those wildcards is going to cast a wider net into the keyword search for you to be less likely to exclude something from what you want to view. At this stage, you want to see what opportunities are out there. So the way that I encourage you all to search this tool is to cast that wider net and not exclude any potential results from your search. Now, at this stage, right now, you haven't had to log into anything. You haven't had to go through a firewall. You're looking at a public document. But I do encourage any vendor who's interested in taking part of the public procurement process, I encourage you to make a free login ID in the vendor self-service portal on behalf of your company. There's a lot of advantages to doing that. You can set up commodity code alerts. You can save all of your company information so it's there anytime you want to submit a bid. You don't have to, fill it out on paper each time. If you want to keep your response process all paper, at least for my agency, you can absolutely do that. But there is some advantages there's a lot of advantages actually to having a vendor self-service login, especially when it comes time to, when you are about to receive payment for widgets from the state, you can track the progress of that through this portal. Now, one thing I want to warn you about, if you make this user ID, you're going to get an email from the OASIS system that says, congratulations, you're now registered to do business with the state of West Virginia, or something to that effect. And that's a little bit misleading. And what I want to point out is that it actually doesn't register you with any state agencies' required processes. For example, creating a vendor self-service ID does not automatically register you with the Secretary of State, with the purchasing division, or any other agency. It just means you've created a login for this portal. But since that email says congratulations, the automatic email says congratulations, you're now registered, I just want to point out that for your reference, because it is a point of confusion. But remember, after you create that user ID, you can bid on as many things you want for free. You don't have to go through any of those agency registrations until you are the successful recipient of a contract. Now, from my agency's perspective, if you want to go ahead and complete our registration requirements, we just need to know certain information about your company. And when it comes time for you to receive a contract, there's a $125 administrative fee for you to pay in order to completely register with the purchasing division. But you don't have to do that to start bidding on state opportunities. Now, here's what your dashboard looks like once you create a login ID for the vendor self-service portal. The first screen that you see is there on the left that tells you information about your company and whether or not you're registered with agencies like purchasing and finance. And I mentioned the commodity code email alerts, which is probably going to be something of great interest to most of you. Once you have a user ID, you can go edit your account and go to the tab called commodities, which is there on the right screenshot that is on the screen right now. And under commodities in your account, you can add a long list of commodity codes that describe what it is you're in business to do, and save that to your profile. And then anytime a state agency procurement officer is searching for vendors that can perform that certain task or provide that certain widget, they can search those commodity codes and find you in order to either send you a solicitation or go directly to you for something that is under $5,000 or maybe an emergency situation. Now, when it comes to looking at the details of a solicitation opportunity, and again, we're still expanding on the answer to the question, what does the state of West Virginia need? I mentioned that you can find the nitty-gritty about each solicitation opportunity by clicking on the blue project link in the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin. And if you don't remember, I'll jump back here to it very quickly. If you look at that third column, you see a hyperlink for a project number, and that's ARFQ with a number. If you click that, let's say I want to know more about that specific project, clicking that will take you to a screen that looks exactly like this, that expands on the description of what it is the state agency is trying to purchase. And there's also going to be descriptive attachments that have things like, that agency's terms and conditions, but more importantly, a detailed description of the widget or the project that the agency needs the private sector to complete. So whether it's a long list of part numbers the agency needs, or whether it is architectural diagrams for a construction project, you're going to find it in the purchasing bulletin under that solicitation link in the attachment section. And I'll pause. Oh, and here in the general information tab for a solicitation in the bulletin, you can see, the basic information. It's out for bid, how much time is left, who is the procurement officer administering the solicitation, etc. So I've mentioned commodity code 7 times, and for those of you who may not be familiar, I'm going to go into some detail about just what a commodity code is, because they're actually very important to connecting you with specific opportunities with our state agencies. And, hopefully everybody on this call will understand the metaphor, but a commodity code is comparable to the old Dewey Decimal System that we all learned in school in our libraries. And commodity codes are numerical descriptors for everything on planet Earth that can be manufactured and sold. And in fact, there's hundreds of thousands of commodity codes in the library of codes. And so whatever it is you're in business to do, I can guarantee you there is a commodity code, or most likely several commodity codes, that describe what it is you do or you manufacture, or what service you provide to your customers. Now, there's several different commodity code libraries out there. The one that the state of West Virginia uses, it comes from the United Nations, and it's called the United Nations Standard Products and Service Code System, or UNSPSC for short. And if you want to look up which UNSPSC commodity codes describe your business, I encourage you to search the UNSPSC website, which is there at the bottom of this slide in my last bullet point, and just type in a short description of what you do, and then save the commodity codes that it is going to show you correlate to your business. And when you, what I cannot encourage you more to do this is when you look up those codes on this United Nations website, write down the ones that describe your business. And if and when you make your vendor self-service account at wvoasis.gov, take those commodity codes and enter them under your commodities tab in your dashboard. And there's on that right screenshot is where you would do that by clicking the blue button that says add commodity codes. And that is how the state of West Virginia knows what it is you're in business to do and what you can provide to us. And that is my high-level overview of how you can find out what the state needs. Now, that's the longest strategy that I go into detail about. And just for those of you that are dreading the fact that I said I go into 3 strategies, that's actually the one I spend the most time on. So the second and third are actually a lot briefer. So the second strategy is really most focused on businesses that you are already picturing that any potential transaction between you and a state agency is going to be in that under $50,000 world. And what I encourage you to do, if you think that's going to be your bread and butter, so to speak, go to our procurement officer listing, which is on that link there at the bottom of this slide, and find 5, 6, 7, 8 agencies whose mission you think would require what it is you can provide to your customers. And there's going to be specific designees. Again, we call them procurement officers, but they are the state employees who are responsible for purchasing in that agency. And what I encourage vendors to do for the relevant agencies for your business is to send no more than a page-long introduction to the procurement officer saying, here's who I am, here's where I'm located, here's what I could provide to your agency someday. You know, next time you're putting out that opportunity for bid, or if you have an emergency situation, please let me know so I can give you a price for that widget or service. Even though there are ways to connect you with contract opportunities, sometimes it's hard for us to know what vendors are out there in the world unless you've introduced yourselves to us. So marketing yourselves to state agencies for transactions that are going to be in the under $50,000 threshold, especially if what you provide to the state would be under $5,000 per transaction, it's going to be a very valuable introduction for you to make. And this is the reason why we have procurement officer contact information on the purchasing division website. Now, if you want to get into the weeds, so to speak, and do your homework about what the state is trying to buy based on what the state has bought in the past, there's a section of my agency's website, wvpurchasing.gov, that is called transparency. And to us, transparency is not just a buzzword. We actually back up our claims of transparency with information and data on our website that you can look at. And again, there's no firewall, there's no password requirement. Anybody in the world with an internet connection can go look and see the details of the state of West Virginia's public procurement process and my agency. So the 3 things on our transparency section that I really want to direct your attention to answers the question, what is the state trying to buy? What offers have been made from the vendor community for those things? And who was the ultimate successful vendor? And the first piece of that trifecta of information is the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin that we have talked about as being the public document saying what state agencies need. What you may not know is on our website, after a bid opening, we publish vendor responses for everything that we are administering on behalf of our agencies. And that's in our transparency section under bids received. Now, the relevance of that to you, other than wanting to see who else bid on a specific solicitation. Let's say that you want to compete for something that's put out for bid every 6 months or every 12 months. Well, it would be advantageous for you to, when you're doing your homework in preparation of your response, is to see who bid on it the last time, what do their bids look like, and how deep was the competition. So this is all knowable information that we have out there on the website. And I know that a lot of vendors, that are really doing their homework in preparation for a solicitation response, will look and see who responded for this particular widget the last time a state agency purchased it. And then our notice of award report's going to actually tell you who the ultimate successful vendor was for these transactions that were going through the public procurement process. So the third and the last strategy that I'm going to go into detail about, which again, these are not the only pathways for you to successfully receive a contract. They're just the three that I think are most important for you to know today. The third strategy here is a longer term pursuit, but it's a potentially higher yield pursuit than just selling, 50 widgets to an agency on a slow Tuesday. And the third strategy, I'm going to talk about what we call statewide contracts. And a statewide contract is something that my agency administers for all the agencies for the most commonly purchased commodities and services that the state of West Virginia is going to need. And there's about 70 commodities that multiple agencies need on a regular basis, that because of that bulk need, we put together a year-long contract or more that is going to award that commodity to a specific vendor. And what this does from our perspective is use that bulk buying power to get the lowest price for these commonly needed services. And you want to look and see the full listing of all of our current statewide contracts. Again, there's about 70 out there at any given time. That's the link on our website for you to see them. And this is what the list looks like. And you'll see that right now there's statewide contracts for everything from food to fuel to different types of software, furniture, office supplies, et cetera, et cetera. Now, not everybody is going to be in business to provide these commonly needed goods and services. But if you are, and there's a statewide contract that is out there for what it is that you can deliver, then this is going to be something that you potentially want to think about dedicating a lot of resources to. Now, let's say that you can provide light bulbs. I can't add you to the light bulb contract tomorrow, but go to this website and look and see when the light bulb contract expires. And if it is going to go back out for bid at any given time, that's how much time you have to prepare and do your homework to compete for the next light bulb contract when it comes back out for bid. And again, for something that we need all the time, like light bulbs, so we can get the most rock bottom price year long, we'll award this contract to an exclusive provider for the course of a year, 2 years, etc. And our promise to all of our statewide contract vendors is we're only going to buy these light bulbs from you and no other vendor, because you've given us the most rock bottom price possible. And that's why it's a long-term pursuit, because it may be 6 months before the light bulb contract goes back out for bid, but it's a potentially high yield opportunity if you're the exclusive light bulb provider for all state agencies in all of West Virginia's 55 counties. So good. So because I administer the program, I feel obligated to tell you about vendor registration at the purchasing division. And if you were going to be eligible to receive a contract, then we would just need some information about your company and then payment of an annual fee if you're going to be selling more than $5,000 worth of goods and services to the state of West Virginia. This is a legislative requirement, but we make the process as easy as possible for any vendor that needs to register with the purchasing division, which does have to take place before you deliver, say, light bulbs to a state agency. The things that we need to know about your company before you can get a state contract are your legal name, your physical address, your telephone number, and most importantly, your current active federal tax ID number. So remember, we're spending state money. We need to make sure we spend state money with businesses that are legitimate. So, these are things that we need to know about you before we hand over taxpayer money to you. Now, our vendor registration program at the purchasing division doesn't just, process registrations and collect registration fees. We also do things like these lovely vendor webinars that make you aware of some of the blueprint for public procurement. And if you all want to have a longer conversation about your business after this webinar, we can send you as much information as you want by email, US mail, or you can come into Building 15 here on the Capitol Complex, and we'll sit down and talk about your specific business, and we'll help you find, some specific opportunities, or more importantly, specific strategies for you to compete for state contracts. Now, something else we can do for you potentially is certification as a small women or minority-owned business. And what the SWAM certification program was created for the purchasing division by the legislature in 2012, and it gave us the mission of certifying whether or not a business was any of these three categories or some combination of these three categories: small businesses, women-owned businesses, and minority-owned businesses. And if you think that you might qualify in one of these three categories, you can apply to be a SWAM certified business and then receive a letter from us certifying that you have met the definition of a SWAM certified business in accordance with the state of West Virginia Code 58359. And what this could do for you, especially if you're a West Virginia vendor, is, let's say that everything that you've heard me go into detail about today is not for you. Well, but let's say you want to take part in another state's public procurement process. Well, if that state or a federal entity, for example, will reciprocate West Virginia SWAM certification, you may get a bidding preference with that other entity if they will recognize our SWAM certification and the fact that you carry the certification with you when you are competing in that state. So there could be an opportunity for a West Virginia vendor to bring an out-of-state contract back home because you have West Virginia SWAM certification. We also have people that need this registration for other reasons. We've had West Virginia vendors applying for federal funding that need this certification before they go forward. They might be, we've had West Virginia vendors applying for a certification in another state that needed this SWAM certification from their home state before they can move forward. So if there's anything that we can do, we want to register, or I shouldn't say register, we want to certify West Virginia SWAM vendors anytime it's possible, because there's opportunities for you when you carry this certification with you. And any documentation I need to provide for the other opportunity that you're pursuing, if West Virginia SWAM certification will help you, I'll be more than happy to provide what you need. So that is the end of my first half. That's actually the end of the first half of this webinar. And the rest of the webinar is going to be about the different contract types that the purchasing division will award. And this is going to be taken over by Courtney Johnson here at the purchasing division. And I'm going to look at our moderator here to turn this over to the next speaker.
Good morning, everyone. Mark went over in great detail about how to find solicitations in the vendor self-service portal in WV Oasis. So I'm going to start off talking about what types of solicitations are advertised in vendor self-service. The most commonly advertised is the request for quotation, or we call it an RFQ. And there are actually two different types of RFQs that you will see in vendor self-service. There's a CRFQ and an ARFQ. An ARFQ is a solicitation that's being advertised by a state agency. Now, Mark went into detail about the spending thresholds. So if you see a solicitation that starts with ARFQ, you can presume that solicitation is going to be below $50,000 or the agency's delegated threshold. Now, you'll want to make sure that you review the solicitation documents to see how to respond to that ARFQ. You can do it through vendor self-service electronically, but you want to make sure that you review the documents on how to submit a solicitation response to a state agency to an ARFQ. If you see that a solicitation begins with CRFQ, you know that that's more than likely that will be an award that will be over the delegated authority threshold. And those are advertised by the West Virginia Purchasing Division. So that's a central request for quotation. You want to make sure that you read through the instructions to bidders that are contained in the solicitation documents, because that's going to tell you the information about how to submit the bid. We here at the Purchasing Division accept bids electronically through vendor self-service. You can also fax your bid to the Purchasing Division. You can mail it. You can also drop it off in person between the hours of 8:15 to 4:30. If it is a CRFQ, we do not accept emailed responses. Now follow the agency instructions for the A-level solicitations. When you go into WV Oasis, you want to make sure that you download all of the attachments. So that's where you're going to find your complete solicitation documents. You want to make sure that you download each one. I spoke earlier about the instructions to vendors. You're also going to see the terms and conditions that are for that solicitation, the specifications and pricing pages. If it's a construction project, you might also find construction documents, drawings, or maps. You want to make sure that you read the instructions to vendors submitting bids, because that's going to give you information such as if there's going to be a mandatory pre-bid meeting. And it's also going to give you the technical question deadline. Each solicitation that we advertise gives a window for vendors to submit questions regarding that solicitation. So you want to make sure that you are aware of that technical question deadline. We're also going to give you information on how to respond to a bid with the West Virginia Purchasing Division and the bid opening date and time. If you have technical questions on a solicitation, and I'm going to speak especially to a CRFQ or any solicitations advertised by the Purchasing Division, which I said earlier would begin with a C, you want to make sure that if you have questions regarding a solicitation, that those must be submitted in writing to the buyer listed in the instructions to vendors. We don't accept questions regarding the actual specifications or terms and conditions or anything like that by phone. You must submit those in writing. Now, during the solicitation process, we do have the blackout period, which means you cannot have direct contact with the agency. So if you have questions regarding the solicitations, you must contact the buyer listed, and that must be in writing. We also have what's called best value solicitation, and the first one that we'll discuss is a request for proposal. Now, those are all solicited by the Purchasing Division, and those are awarded to the highest scoring vendor. Now, with the request for proposal, we do not accept responses through vendor self-service. We have the technical portion and the cost portion, and those need to be in separate envelopes. We also have the expression of interest. Those are for architectural and engineering services, and those are actually evaluated based on qualifications and experience, and it is ranked by the Best Value Committee. Those will have an interview, and the agency will score on the interview process as well, and the award actually goes to the highest ranked vendor, and then that's when you'll enter negotiations with the agency to determine the price. Now, during the process, you cannot have contact with the agency or the architectural engineering firm. So any questions would need to be submitted to the agency or to the Purchasing Division buyer. Now, there are two different types of expression of interest. If it's an AEOI, that is going to be advertised by the state agency. And then we have the CEOI, which is advertised by the West Virginia Purchasing Division. We also have a request for information, which will be a CRFI, and this is used for market research purposes only. There's no award from a CRFI. You'll have to submit your responses to the purchasing division, and we don't accept those electronically through vendor self-service. So those would actually have to be mailed or dropped off in person. Now, when you're submitting your bid, you want to make sure that you can meet all the requirements that are listed in the documents. So make sure you read the specifications carefully. If it has words such as will, shall, and must, you want to make sure that you can meet all of those mandatory requirements before submitting your bid. You also want to make sure that anything that requires a notary seal, that has been completed. Also, on every contract that the state awards, we require commercial general liability insurance. You can see any insurance requirements in Section 8 of the general terms and conditions of the solicitation. The state must be listed as an additional insured and a certificate holder on that certificate of insurance. If the solicitation requires a bid bond, and that's generally required on construction contracts, you want to make sure that your bid bond is completed correctly and that it is submitted with your bid. We can't obtain a bid bond after the bid opening, so it must be submitted with your bid. Other documents that you're not required to submit with your bid, but it would be required prior to the award of a contract, if there were any addendums that were issued during the solicitation process, you're going to be required to submit an addendum acknowledgement form. If there was any type of licensing or certifications that were required in the solicitation, you're going to have to provide those prior to award. If you have a nursing license or a contractor's license and it was required in the solicitation, you'll have to provide those prior to award. And you will see those in Section 7 of the general terms and conditions of the solicitation. If it's a construction contract, you'll also be required to provide the drug-free workplace affidavit and a subcontractors list. All of these are not required to be submitted with your bid, but they would be required prior to award. If you're submitting your response in WVOASIS, you could either do it all as one attachment, or if you're attaching your terms and conditions, your pricing page, you can do all those separate. Bids must be received by the date and time that's listed on the instructions to vendors. The state by law cannot accept any bids that are received late. Here at the purchasing division, our bid closing is always 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you arrive in our front office at 1:31, we will not be able to accept your bid. It would be considered late. So you always want to make sure that you review the instructions to vendors, what time that particular solicitation closes, because like I said, by law, we cannot accept late bids. Now, if you're responding to any solicitation that begins with an A, you want to make sure that you read the instructions to vendors or the solicitation documents carefully to make sure that you're aware of how to submit your bid, because we at the Central Purchasing Division may have a different procedure than the agency that you're responding to has. So you may be able to submit your bid by email to that agency. But here at the Purchasing Division, we do not accept email bids. So you always want to make sure that if you're responding to an agency delegated purchase, that you review those instructions on how to submit a bid to that particular agency. So central purchasing solicitations, and that's the purchasing division, you can submit your bid, like I said, through vendor self-service. You can fax it. We do accept paper bids by mail, UPS, FedEx, etc., or dropped off in person. Now, if you're faxing your bid, and as I said, the bids close at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, you want to make sure that you start faxing your bid early in the day, because around 12 o'clock, people start faxing their bids in and the fax machine can get bogged down. So you want to make sure that you start faxing your bid earlier in the morning, because all pages have to be received. The last page of your bid has to be received by 1:30. If it's 1:31 and we haven't received the last page, it will be considered late and disqualified. Following the bid opening, all bids received are posted on the West Virginia Purchasing Division's website. Every bid that we receive for a solicitation, all solicitations that open that day are posted on our website. Now, once the bids have been opened and are posted on our website, the agency will begin to do the evaluation. If it's advertised by the Purchasing Division, the state agency will then complete their evaluation and they'll submit their recommendation to award to their Purchasing Division buyer. Once an agency has submitted their recommendation to award to the buyer, that's when they will begin their review and make sure that the vendor that they have recommended to award meets all the mandatory requirements listed in the solicitation. Once the buyer has completed their evaluation and agrees with their recommendation, that's when the buyer will begin the award process. Mandatory requirements prior to award regarding registration are the vendor must be registered with the West Virginia Secretary of State's office, the West Virginia Tax Department, Insurance Commission, and the vendor also must complete your registration in WVOASIS for solicitations that have been advertised by the purchasing division. Once we've awarded a contract, each vendor that submitted a response to that solicitation will be notified by an emailed letter that the contract has been awarded, and that letter will state who it's been awarded to. No work can be done until you have received the contract notification. You cannot begin to work until you receive that notification that you've been awarded and the contract has been encumbered. So once you receive that encumbered contract, the blackout period is no longer in effect, and you can actually reach out to the agency contact person who will be listed on the face of the contract, so you know exactly who to reach out to once you receive your award. Now, we do have two types of protest procedures. We have the protest of specifications. So if you're reading the specifications and you believe that it's geared toward one type of brand name or one type of product, you have the ability to protest the specifications. That protest must be submitted in writing 5 days prior to the bid opening. We also have the protest of award. I talked about once a contract is awarded through the purchasing division, you'll receive an email letter that states who the contract has been awarded to. So that begins the protest period. You have 5 days after the award of a contract. So when you receive that letter, that's when the 5 days begin. You have to submit your protest in writing to the purchasing division buyer. Now, after a contract is awarded, there might be instances where we'll have to make a change to the contract. Those are called change orders. Some of those modifications might be renewals, or we might need to extend a contract. If it's a construction contract and there's been an issue or something arises that was going to take longer than expected, then we might issue a change order for that. No work can be performed until you receive that encumbered change order. Now, a change order for an agency level contract, the agency, that particular state agency is going to process that change order. If a contract that begins with a C, like a CMA or a CPO, that is going to be processed by the purchasing division. If it's prepared by the agency and then it's submitted to the purchasing division buyer, they're going to review it, and then it goes through our approval process, and then it goes to the Attorney General's office. It's encumbered, and that's when the renewal will begin or the additional work might begin. Now, things to remember, I said earlier that we cannot accept late bids at the purchasing division. We also have the blackout period, which is when a solicitation is out to bid. You cannot have any type of communication with the state agency. All communication must be routed through the purchasing division buyer. Once that contract has been awarded and encumbered, then the blackout period is no longer in effect, and you can actually have contact with the state agency. When you're submitting your bid, we encourage you to submit all the documents prior to the award or with your bid. And that way we can speed up the award process. Oftentimes we have to reach out to vendors to request anything in the bid package that requires signature. We have to contact vendors for them to sign certain documents or to provide the insurance certificate. So if you can get all those documents within your bid response, that helps speed up the award process. Each solicitation will have either an agency master terms and conditions or the general terms and conditions. If it's a solicitation that's being advertised by a state agency, that would be the agency terms and conditions. If it's one that's advertised by the purchasing division, then it would be the purchasing division's general terms and conditions. We have the link to those on this PowerPoint. Now, after a contract has been awarded, if there are any issues that come up, if you're going to be late delivering something, or if you can't provide the product that you bid on in the amount of time that the agency required, you want to make sure that you communicate with the agency contact. The agency will document any type of communication they've had with you. If multiple attempts to resolve the issue have failed, the agency will then contact the purchasing division to step in and try to resolve any issues. We have the references page here, and this will give you links to different sections of our website that you might find helpful. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Mark Totten to take us home here.
Okay, we did get a question here on the chat, which I'm glad that people submitted one, and I do want to answer it. It has to do with when we were talking about SWAM certification, which So our SWAM certification program has to do with women-owned businesses, small businesses, and minority-owned businesses. The question that came through the Telegraph is, are businesses owned and operated by persons with disabilities eligible for something? And the answer is yes, but it wouldn't be through the SWAM certification. The legislation that created SWAM certification made it the three categories that I've mentioned. But SWAM certification is not the only business certification that the state of West Virginia or another agency or the federal government could, bestow on a vendor. So there are certifications for businesses that are owned and operated by persons with disabilities. It's just not SWAM. And, for example, the federal government or maybe a state opportunity would exist. And in that language, there would be something for businesses owned and operated by persons with disabilities. If you have a certification associated with that, I think it would more likely be something associated with federal funding. But so the answer to your question is yes, there are opportunities. It's just not defined under SWAM certification. And if there's any other questions between now and the end, please send them through the Telegraph. So to sum up, these strategies and to sum up, my message to vendors this morning, please read and search through the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin as much as possible. The Purchasing Bulletin could absolutely be your best friend if you are interested in expanding your business model to do business with the state agencies in the 55 counties. And especially if you think that what you would sell to the state would be under $50,000, the threshold there, or whatever any particular agency's threshold is. Make sure they know who you are. Market yourself directly to the 5, 6, 7, 8 agencies on our procurement officer listing whose mission you think would need the goods and services that you provide to your customers. And then that third strategy I talked about, it's a longer term pursuit, but it's a potentially high yield pursuit if you become the exclusive provider of a specific commodity or service to the state through a statewide contract opportunity. Learn what agencies need. I can't overstate, the most important thing for you to know is what we need. And we make that available through the Purchasing Bulletin. And then we also have those alerts that you could get in your email box based on commodity codes. The state procurement officers at each agency are known people whose contact information we have on our website, whether they like it or not. And then we have a tremendous amount of information available on my agency's website, wvpurchasing.gov, in the sections called Transparency and the section called Vendor Registration. A lot of the information that we've gone over today is now part of the vendor registration page because we want as many vendors participating in this process as possible. It's to our advantage, it's to your advantage. So it's win-win for as many vendors as possible to be engaged in the public procurement process. And then if you think you're going to be a regular player, keep your vendor registration with the purchasing division updated and keep your 2-year SWAM certification updated if you think you fall into the category of minority-owned business, small business, or a women-owned business. And with that, we've got some time for questions here. We'll open up the floor for questions for myself or for Courtney. And while we wait for those to come in onto the Telegraph, our contact information is there on the slide. And also, Carol Hudnall at the West Virginia Purchasing Division is our vendor registration coordinator. And she can be a resource as well, especially if you want to get your vendor registration up to date with the Purchasing Division, or if you want to apply for small women and minority-owned business certification status. So I'm going to look at our moderator, Teresa, here and see what is coming across the wire.
Are there set-aside procurements for SWAM vendors?
That's a very good question. The question is, are there set-aside funds for SWAM vendors? West Virginia is not a state whose legislation has any part of the budget set aside for vendors that are designated as small, women, and minority-owned businesses. But I know, for example, the Commonwealth of Virginia, you at least used to set aside 5% of their budget for businesses that they call DBE. We call it SWAM in West Virginia. The Commonwealth of Virginia calls it DBE. But the concept that you're asking about is there in some states, that a specific amount of the state budget must be spent with SWAM or DBE certified businesses. Now, there's still relevance to you if you're a West Virginia vendor for you to apply for our SWAM certification, because if you want to get certified in Virginia as a DBE, you have to first have your West Virginia SWAM certificate in hand. So even though West Virginia law does not set aside any part of our budget for SWAM spend, there's other states that do. And the Purchasing Division SWAM certification program is still a gateway to you for that. Now, while we wait for any more questions to come through, this does not have to be the end of the conversation between the purchasing division and your business. As I mentioned, my program here at the agency is more than happy to send information to you specifically by email or US mail. We're also happy to have a specific conversation about what it is you're in business to do. We can also check to see if you are currently registered with the West Virginia Purchasing Division. And one thing that I want to mention about the vendor self-service portal at wvoasis.gov that I encourage everybody to sign up for, you may already have an account on the vendor self-service portal. If you do, I encourage you to reactivate that account, not create a brand new record for your company. If you've not done business with the state in a few years, the person who set that up in the past may not be with your company anymore. And you need to call the OASIS help desk to have that account handed back to you. What we don't want is for you to set up a whole new vendor record in the system just because you don't have the old password for maybe a former employee's user ID. So it's very important. You may already have an account and you want to get that reactivated as opposed to creating a new one.
Mark, we do have a little more. Some state governments, like Ohio, will use the vendor GSA schedule as a way of purchasing services or products.
That's going to be a buyer question that we need to get back with you about. We're going to take note of that and get your contact information, and we'll consult with our contracting unit in order to get something specific. Now, in some cases, we have contracts that are based on cooperatives like NASPO or NIGP. We don't have a lot of them. For most of the things that the state of West Virginia procures, we create our own contract for it. But we're going to get you some elaborative language on that so we make sure we answer that accurately. And we'll get your contact information that we can send that to you.
Yes, I would like to make mention to Kelly, who asked that question. If you could send some of that information to one of those email addresses you see on the screen, that way we'll be sure to have your contact information. That would be a big help.
Yeah, we have more time for questions if anybody has any. Or again, a question like that, or a question like the businesses owned or operated by persons with disabilities. These are good questions and answers for everyone to hear. So we definitely encourage you to ask questions now, just so we can have this discussion. I mean, we are here at your disposal. We are here to make sure you know more about the public procurement process. We don't want state purchasing to be a mystery. That's actually the last thing we want, and that's why we're taking our mornings here to make sure that we are open and transparent and getting all this information out there for you all, so we can so there's more vendors participating and that you're aware of all the opportunities that are out there. All right. Well, again, you are definitely encouraged to email any of us on the screen. I thank you all for being here this morning. My name is Mark Totten, and I was joined here by Courtney Johnson and Teresa Cudlip. Lord, I'm looking at Carol's name on the slide.
That's okay.
Again, that's all. Obviously, my caffeine level was not high enough, but hopefully, despite my under caffeination, we still delivered some good information to you about doing business with the state of West Virginia. We want to extend this conversation as much as you would like us to. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us or make an appointment to see us here in Building 15. But I thank you. Courtney thanks you. Teresa thanks you. And please reach out to any of us, including Carol, and let us know what we can do for you. We appreciate your time greatly. We know you had a lot of things to do this morning. And everyone have a good day. Good luck.